Hi YouTube, when I actually get around to uploading this, we're going to be working on the Screaming Gone. So, the way I'm going to approach this is maybe a little different to what you guys have seen me do in the past. We're going to work a bit thicker here and really try and just like block in some general areas of the fur, because most of the painting is going to be done through texturing. 90% of this model is fur, so that's going to be most of the painting time, other than like the hoof hands. I don't know what you call it. Other than that, and the horns, and then like the rib cage, which you basically can't see, sadly. Like, it's all underneath, so you really never see it that much. Other than those parts, basically the majority of the model is fur. So I'm going to these horns, by the way, I was looking at pictures of antelopes trying to decide what kind of, if I want to try and like mimic a certain breed or whatever of antelope. They're very wildebeest looking. And wildebeests are normally like very dark black or brown. I don't know if I want to go that dark, but I am going to use brown here. Like arm. So I'm going to go with quite a dark brown, but I'm going to do a few different colors at the same time, because what I'm going to do is like people try and get too fancy with fur too fast. So they get way too detailed. So guess what we're going to use? We're going to use a big old whopping size 6. We're going to mix up a couple different tones here just so that we can like begin to block in sort of the general. I'm sticking to like slightly darker colors because I'm going to build up texture as I go. And I want to leave some room in the lights. But I'm basically going to begin by just like really simply, like, see how you don't see like any like actual shadows up here? So what we're going to do is we're going to focus on just getting like these big tufts, right? That was loud. Oh, thanks. Thanks, Forrest. That's my roommate. Yeah, so we're just going to focus on like big areas and getting these larger tufts blocked in. I don't want to go too thin here, because if I go too thin, it's going to start to act a bit like a wash and I'm going to have to do more than one layer. So I actually do want quite a bit of thick paint. I'm also not worried about filling in it more texture. If anything, if the paint is thick and fills in some of the, which it won't, you can paint really thick and it won't happen. But if it did, I wouldn't have a problem with it. So just like so. Also not worried about like painting over the skulls and stuff. All these little details like the ropes and skulls. I'm going to have to go back and paint them anyways. You could probably do this way faster with the airbrush, but I'm going to do it with the brush just to show you. I wouldn't want Reddit complaining about how, or YouTube comments complaining about how they can't afford an airbrush, so show me how to do it without. Not everyone owns an airbrush, dude. So just really get the paint on, right? Like, don't. This is not the time to worry about being clean, okay? Roger. All right, we're just laying down a good base layer. Nice brown base layer to build on top of. Yep. So here, yeah, and I'm moving the brush with the direction of the tuff, making sure I get into all those little crevices right now. Okay. The idea here is to treat the different tufts as like little individual volumes, all right? Then we're going to mix a darker tone, and where the tufts are more in shadow, like down here, we're going to start, we can actually wet blend a little if we're moving fast. Okay, as we transition to these shadow areas, I'm just going to base coat these with a much darker brown, right? So we're trying to treat his whole neck first as one big shape, and then as we move to the different individual tufts, we'll begin to render those as individual forms, and then we'll render individual hairs, right? So keep it simple, right? Big shapes first. In principle, this is the same way that I normally paint, at least philosophically speaking, right? So I'm thinking about the large forms, like his head, right? Get the underside of the jaw. Okay. Get the underside of his neck, where this stuff is all in shadow. And then as I move to different regions or different volumes, I will begin to work more in midtones. So we're rendering the overall form of his body volumetrically first, and then working into smaller shapes as we go, until we get all the way down to individual hairs. The reason I wouldn't do like a contrast paint or something like that on this model is because you're going to end up with too much like shadows on these upper facing parts, which is the problem with, well, my issue with the sculpt anyways. The sculpt is, okay, let me just preface this by saying that Jacques-Alexandre Giroux, who sculpted this model, is insanely good. All right, this is a absolutely fantastic sculpt. However, it is not the best sculpt in the world to paint. Fur is soft, plastic is not. So, in order to fight the sculpt, like we end up fighting the sculpt a little bit here because we're trying to soften the look of the plastic to make it look more like fur. Okay. See, like all of this area here, this big section of his hind leg. We're going to treat that all as like one big area. I'm going to need more paint for this. You're going to go through a lot of paint base coating a model like this. And because we're laying the paint on pretty thick, I don't want to sit here and base coat this model like multiple times, okay? One thick coat. Right, so if you need more paint, just grab more paint. Okay, see how I can see the white underlying white, and you can still see like that's a pseudo thick layer, right? So I want to try and avoid that. I just want to really get everything with the initial layer down. Because we aren't going to paint the individual hairs, at least not the individual sculpted hairs. We're going to create our own hairs. I might do something with the tail later. Actually, you know what's interesting? Wildebeests have pretty short... Oh, no, they have pretty long tails. So actually their tails get a little lighter as it goes out. So maybe I'll end up doing that. But for now, that just means painting it higher values towards the end. I also don't want his tail to be ridiculously light anyways. So I don't want it to be distracting. But yeah, you can see just how heavy we're going with the paint here. Any questions so far? Right, so like That's sort of one side base coated. Any of these ropes and things, I'm also not really worried about at the moment. Just cover it all. You got to catch it first. As you run the labyrinth, high bones. Hi, Anthony. Okay, so you can see that the primer here is getting darker, right? So we're gonna switch to a darker layer. But it's not pure black, right? So we're in these kind of mid-tone. And then here it gets very dark. So we'll switch and move to our darkest brown. And because it's all kind of wet, we can sort of wet blend it a little bit, but the wet blending doesn't really matter. Like the blending of it doesn't matter that much because we're gonna eventually go over all of it anyways. Oh yeah, that was definitely a little disappointing. Speaking of Michael Pena, I watched Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die. He's pretty good in that. I like Sam Rockwell though, so. Also, I beat Resident Evil 9. Yes. And it was good. I did. I like the mix of Grace's gameplay being more like Resident Evil 2 and Leon's gameplay being more like Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 happens to be one of my favorite games ever made. By the way, if you're getting air bubbles, blow on that and try and pop them, because they can leave when little air bubbles dry, which might be because you're not using enough paint. You know, too much water or something in your brush, making little bubbles. This is why I say, don't be afraid to go through some paint on this guy. When you're doing this type of painting. Actually, might want the brush a little drier. Not enough that you're like dry brushing, but you're doing pretty heavy layers here. Hi, Renaud. It didn't take that long. The game was 12. I beat it in 12 hours. Did I end up smoothing? Yes. I explained that a little earlier. Painted a couple layers of PVA on this upper, I guess you would call like a main. And then one layer on the rest. It doesn't like, it's not going to get rid of it. Okay. Like you'd have to use Milliput or something, and it would take probably hours of resculpting the fur if you really wanted to get rid of it. So it's not gone, right? But it is a little smoother. It's like maybe 20% smoother. It's just not as sharp as it was. At one point, it was very sharp. Am I looking forward to Code Veronica? Not really. That was not my favorite. I would punch a boulder again, though, if they remade 5. I have, to be honest, zero interest in 11th edition. I think the launch box is very cool. I painted one of the models from it already. I'll show you guys again in a second. I mean, I converted it, but yeah, the new orc models are very cool, but I don't play 40K proper. I only play Kill Team, so new edition, I don't even know what they changed. So why did you Zenithal versus just airbrushing it with the brown? No particular reason. I mean, Zenithal helps me see sort of the volumes. I was explaining, I could have done this step with the airbrush, but then the internet would cry about only these YouTubers can afford these expensive tools, and they think that all of us just have airbrushes. Not that I care, but what's up, Lewis? No, I will continue to make fun of Reddit. Some of these deeper areas, we can get a little bit of the shadow. Just mash it in there, dude. Speaking of expensive tools for the hobby, tomorrow I need to fire up the 3D printer and try and print a base for this guy. Yeah, I can never remember how to say his name. Turzka? I don't know. He's another Kingdom Death fan. He sculpted a base for this. And it's pretty cool. So I will just use that. Targza, yeah. Speaking of other Kingdom Death people, two other Kingdom Death people actually. People you should follow if you like Kingdom Death. Gustavo Munoz is very good. He did a Crimson Crocodile recently that I very much like. And in fact, I will probably be using it as quite the inspiration for doing mine. And Trent Big Deno, who is on Miniature Masters, the Squidmore Miniature Masters that they revealed who all the people were recently, including friend of the channel Aaron Clark, who rated us last week. He's one of the painters on there. Actually, the only person I'm not particularly familiar with is the girl Amelia. I'm not. which I saw Trent already painted his Screaming God and what's her name? What is the name of the? I always forget the name of the other boss. Parasite Queen, right? I want to say Oblivion. Like I get her and the Oblivion Mosquito mixed up. And then I want to say Cockroach Queen because that's another model, but that's a survivor. Yeah, of course she has. It's a freak. All right, we're getting some color down. Got some parts up in here. Just get that paint in there. Just dream it in there. Deno is the equivalent of the Sonic Gotta Go Fast meme as a painter. He is the embodiment of that meme as a painter. Oh, Dano is faster than Arno, for sure. Arno's fast, but Arno's roughly like as fast as I am. Okay, so that's kind of working. Now we're just going to do around his head. Make sure we get all these areas. We're really trying to make sure we're not leaving any parts unpainted at this moment because we're going to be like building up layers, progressively getting lighter. Normally I work back and forth, but when it comes to fur, I like to build the lights more linearly. So working up in layers, get like progressively getting lighter with each layer as I begin to work the texture. I want to make sure that there's no areas that I missed, because then I have to go back, fix it, and then I might mess up something I've done. So in this case, trying to be pretty careful and make sure that I did not forget any spots. I don't even know if that's fur or an arm. I think that's an arm, but whatever. I'd rather get some brown on it than on something that's not supposed to be brown than miss a spot. I'll also decide later if I want to do any like patterning on his face or anything like that. I don't think I want to because I don't want to overly complicate the figure, because there's already going to be there's already a lot of detail in parts, and then on top of that you have like all these different little light sources and stuff. So I think it's probably better overall just to keep his fur kind of simplified and not try and do anything overly complex with the patterning of the fur, other than maybe making some of the tail like a little lighter, but so flip your model over, make sure you don't see any unpainted bits. Okay, I think that's pretty good. I think we're good. Swish, swish, hi. Swish, swishy, shy. Hi. Hello. All right, so that's the initial base coat done. Hi, Dave. No. Did I miss a spot? Maybe. Was it an air bubble? It can happen. Just go back over it if you see one. And this would be even worse if I hadn't done the glue in it. It would be these caverns where the hair is sculpted would be even deeper. So make sure you check it from all your angles. Just try and hit all the spots. Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Swish. All right, so there's the base coating done on the fur anyways. I'll probably come back and base coat the horns. I need to look at color horns do wildebeests have. Rather white. Well, sometimes they're like grayish, sometimes they seem slightly lighter, but they're pretty much look like the same color as their fur. That one has like dark gray black ones. Kind of just grayish. Those ones are slightly lighter. So it looks like they're in general lighter, but just more gray. So that's what we'll probably end up going with. Probably still have some brown in them, like a brown gray instead. Oh yeah, he's a Kingdom Death model for sure. Extremely Kingdom Death. You can see just how much paint we used, basically out of the brown. Old Jason? Jason! Hi, thanks for the Prime. 14 months, someone changed their name. Because don't recognize that one. And you've been subscribed for 14 months, so. Somebody did a name change. Jason. Jason? If you were put into a dungeon like Dungeon Crawler Carl, what class would you want to be? Melee, range? I almost always play a range. I tend to like playing range classes in general. Hello. Yes, it is a lot of brown. Oh yeah, someone was asking about Armageddon earlier. Yeah, we finished the guy from last week. Or I finished everything but his base. So I have to paint his base still, but he is ready to chop. I had never played Skyrim before and went into it going, I'm going to play a stealth archer. Like, I knew nothing, did not know that that would end up being like a meta thing. I was just like, yeah, dude, play the stealth archer. It just makes sense. And then it ended up being very strong. But everyone that does well in Dungeon Crawler Carl does like weird. All of the classes that do well are like these weird anti-game classes. Like they win by breaking the system, not by playing their class. All right. Take a quick break while that dries because I put so much paint on it's still a little wet. Hi, I'm back. Let's start building up some individual layers, shall we? So I'm going to take Plague Brown here. Oh, do I want it that yellow? Not really, actually. So Earth again. This is already kind of yellowish brown. And then instead I'm going to desaturate it a little bit more with something like dark sand. There's a little more white in it. So make a big mixture here. We're only trying to go up a little bit here in terms of value. And what we're going to start to do is now we're going to start to pick out some of these individual shapes. All right. Still not trying to be perfect because we've got to do in like more lines across them anyways. We're looking for these triangular sort of tough shapes. We're going to start to apply this layer over those. What would you recommend when getting overwhelmed with miniature projects and minis, especially ones with lots of details? So when I'm working on like a very big project, I like to set myself like little goals for the day, right? Instead of being like, oh, I need to tackle this whole figure, I can do something like, I'm going to get the weapon painted, or I'm going to get this trim painted. And setting these like small goals for yourself, it makes finishing the project a lot easier, you know, or more manageable. Otherwise, some figures can be, yeah, quite intimidating. Actually, this whole upper section here, I want that to be like a little smoother anyway, so. Right, so we're leaving now some of that underlying layer. We're starting to give some volume to the tufts and not just like the overall shape of the body, right? But we're still filling in the whole tuft and leaving instead some shadow between the larger tufts instead of painting individual hairs. Hi, Sam. If I have to go back and darken some of these, that's fine. I'm just trying to give some shape for now. Right, still using big old brush to do this. And this is how we avoid spaghetti hair. By focusing on larger sections and then working smaller and more detailed. So break it down into chunks, right? Don't be afraid to paint in between the hairs. But my biggest recommendation to being able to paint realistic looking fur is ignoring the individual strands until much later anyways. And ignoring the sculpt, like ignoring the individual sculpted strands. Otherwise, it ends up looking very sharp. One of my problems with Games Workshop style of sculpting fur is they sculpt it in a way to make it work well with washes, but it ends up like things like wolves, right? They look like porcupines. They end up looking like they have quills instead of fur. Generally speaking, I think you guys should be able to see where these like larger forms are, right? Where the hairs clump together. Start to see it taking shape, getting individual sections now. As it begins to curve away from the light, I will do less. Right, so these lower ones. Hello. Will it dry thick like this? Or will details come back out? No, you don't have to worry about it drying thick. And if it did, don't really care if it did, because I want to actually, I don't want as much of the sculpted detail in there. But generally, no, you don't have to worry about it, like filling in details. Because I rather paint my own hairs, honestly. If you're joining us late, I actually used PVA glue. I painted over the fur with PVA glue in order to reduce some of the texture that was there, because it was so deep that it was too much. Now, I prefer a very lightly textured fur, where I can paint my own texture on it over a model that is more suitable to like washing or something, you know? Problem with washes, and I might do some washes on this guy, right? I might do something like this, where I take in like a more like a filtery glaze and sort of unify parts, right? I might do something like that later. But right now, I just want individual shape, right? Like here, I'll show you real quick on this side. So I take a darker tone, and then I can kind of blend this together with a semi-transparent layer. And that will soften it out a little bit. Soften that transition. Right, like, because this is too harsh here, but I've still got more layers to build up. Okay, so now I need to take this guy. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get some of the brown again. Hi, Mose. So a bit of the brown, the earth, and then some of the, wait, you see it turns it a little gray here. So it's like a lighter version of my shadow color. Hi, Monument. How are you? Welcome in, Raiders. Duke Silver. Oh, the killer on the saxophone. So here I'm pushing some of the darker sections with this more brownish gray and beginning to give some of the individual forms to these darker, the more shadowed tufts. What's up? Rattlecan 13, hello. So just try and, yeah. And my motto generally of painting is work big to small, but this is definitely the biggest example I can give. I also say work thick to thin, but in the case of painting fur, we pretty much stay thick the whole time. The queen wasn't bad, honestly. I had one gap on the queen that I have to fill. Yeah, she was all right. Is there a model out there that you're really wanting to paint outside of GW or Kingdom Death? There are models you guys don't know about that I want to paint eventually. That I maybe have had sculpted. There is If you're asking me about commercial models, not really. Really, Dave? All right. That is such a toxic girlfriend question. If I was a worm, would you still love me? No, I just sculpt my own. All right. So now we've got some shapes to the larger tufts. All right. Hi, Dana. We were talking about you earlier, actually. Cool to see you on Miniature Masters. Saw you painted both your Screaming God and geez, dude, she's a Parasite Queen. Every time I forget her name. Am I going to paint the Parasite Queen on stream? I don't know. Maybe. Oh yeah, somebody was talking about assembling it. Here she is. So the only spot that I had ended up with a gap was right here. This is a gap that has to be filled. There's a couple other spots that maybe aren't perfect that while I'm doing it, like couple little tiny spots here and there, that while I fill this one I'll probably touch those up, but in general yeah, not really any gaps on her, so really impressed by how well she went together compared to some of the other figures. Like maybe there's a tiny gap there, but Are you at them already? You've already, or did you have like a campaign that was ready to face them? But yeah, in general, she went together great. She went together very well. And I decided to go with the veilless head. Yeah, I thought the face was pretty cool, so. Anyways, that's the Parasite Queen. Well, let's get back to the Screaming God. Alright, so we've been painting with a very large brush this whole time. Let's switch to a slightly smaller brush. So now we're going to switch to a size 3. And with the same, roughly same value here, we're going to start to connect some and refine some of these smaller shapes a little bit. Okay, so I'm doing little brush strokes in the direction that the hairs grow, but I'm also not caring if I paint in between the sculpted strands, okay? This is more important that I just paint in the direction the hair is growing, right? Using the sculpt as a guide to tell me the direction of the brush stroke, than actually like trying to edge highlight individual strands. It will result in a softer look overall doing it this way. We'll also choose sometimes where I have multiple multiple pieces. So let's use this part for an example, right? I have a few tufts here. It will allow some of the tufts to cross into each other. So it's like the idea is these like, just like we sort of do the lights on muscles so that we make it one solid thing. You can sort of think of it as like a stray hair or something that's crossing over the volumes, right? I also want to point out, and this is very important for painting thin lines, and I've talked about this a couple times, but the angle of the brush to the surface is very important if you want to paint thin lines. You want the brush to be more perpendicular, so you don't want to drag instead of like at an angle like this. If the brush stroke goes like this, the brush is going to widen out. You want the brush stroke to be like this, so it's at more of a perpendicular angle so that you'll get a thinner brush stroke. Sam, it's not really something I do consciously that much, more subconsciously, how I want to interpret the volume or whatever. Right, so we begin to refine some of these shapes here, and they begin to cross over into different sections. And then we can actually come back with some of this darker color here if we want to reintroduce some shadow that we maybe covered over too much before we move on to the next layer. So if we need to introduce a little more thickness to the tuff, right, we can do that. All right, let's work on just the tail for right now, because I think the tail is a pretty easy shape to see the individual tufts. All right, so here we've got to come into some of this darker section. Oh, his head was messing up the focus. Okay, so we're just trying to catch some of these little shapes here. All right, now we're going to push the light more. Now is where we're really going to start to like draw individual lines, right? So tapering it from sort of the top of the tuft like that. See, there might only be 3 sculpted strands here, but because I create this sort of zigzag, I can maybe fit, and I'm not worried about going in between the lines or in between the sculpted hairs. I can maybe fit 4 or 5 or more strands within the space that only 4 are sculpted. So I can actually paint smaller than the sculpted fur and end up with a softer look overall. Now you want the paint here to be thick enough and have enough opacity to cover, but you want it to be slightly more fluid so that it flows off the brush well. And I'm not just painting straight lines, parallel lines. I want those lines to like sawtooth, right? They should zigzag, they should cross over each other. They should create yeah, more depth to the hair, right? Because the hair is not just like fingers like all next to each other, right? The fur is layers on top of each other. So we're trying to represent the idea of this like dense yet soft layered material. It's all crossing over and they like just choosing to do that line there that goes and sort of surrounds this. Maybe here I paint another line like this that crosses from this tuft to this tuft, and it helps join those sections together and creates a more natural flow to the hair. It takes practice. It takes a lot of practice to learn to paint these sorts of thin lines. To understand, like really get a feel for your distance from the model, and then to be able to do it as fast as I do. Like, yeah, it's a skill of itself outside of the usual painting techniques. So we end up with something that looks, because we focused on the big general shape of the tail first, we end up with something, that looks much softer overall, right? We don't have any of these really dark brown shadows on top of the tail. We let those only in the very deepest areas of the tail. And then up top here, we'll keep pushing the light here because none of this has any shape to it yet. And it needs more texture. Now these are actually the hardest part, in my opinion. This central sort of ridge to the tail here is where you're going to have to paint lines going in both directions that like the hair some of the hair start to go one way, some of them start to go another way, some of them crisscross over each other. If you guys didn't know, fur is actually one of my favorite things to paint. I love it. If I was a canvas painter, I would probably paint like ultra realistic, like hyper realism portraits of tigers and shit. Probably. I will do an orc at some point. No, it's just in pins. You can actually, if I hold it like that, you can see the pins going into the plinth. Or not plinth, just a block of wood. Just friction holding it in. Model's not that heavy, so. Hi, Dan. So I'm being pretty deliberate right now. Hello. But if you guys wanted to see, I can do this much faster in when I paint. Like, you guys remember the one I did for Culta Paint? I did it was like a weird lizard tiger thing. I will enter like a flow state when painting fur and just like knock it out. Start moving very fast. Now I'm applying another layer. This is sort of the highlight of the fur. I am trying to picture like it's almost metallic where that highlight position is on each tuft. However, the highlights of hair are anisotropic. Thus they go across volumes in a so they're vertical lines catching the strands, but they tend to chase across a volume. And then I might do a little line like that. That's just random hair out of place. Maybe one like that. So I just let it cross over I just said they don't. That's why I paint the little lines that connect them. You use the little lines as little stray hairs to cross the volumes. And to unify. So yeah, that's basically fur. That's my technique. Now we can have some fun in the lower parts by using a darker color like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to use a bunch of this to get like a very grayish tone. And we can use this as like a secondary sort of color. Like if I was doing a warthog or something, here I'm just going to use it sparingly. But warthogs and stuff, certain other animals, rabbits actually, like little cottontail rabbits, they will often have not just one fur color, but they'll have many subtly different fur colors, different shades of gray and stuff in their fur. So you can do a little of both. So here I'm using this more grayish brown to create like a slight variation in the color. And create another. It's going to be very hard to see in that section anyways. But yeah, you can create use multiple tonalities like with your fur colors. Now, last little thing here, if I want to darken or come back with a tone like the earth, and let's say the fur gets too washed out for the color I'm going for, I can come back with like a filter like this, where it's thinned out, and I can apply a glaze. This is not a wash. I'm not washing the surface. I am glazing the surface sort of evenly to filter the color back, because I don't want to remove the texture that I've painted. I just want to add some saturation back in. Pop some bubbles. Something like that. Difference in glaze and wash in this case is more how much you apply to the surface. A wash is allowed to sort of flow into the recesses wherever it wants to go. It uses capillary action. Here we're trying to kind of apply it to the whole layer even, or the whole surface evenly. It's going to run into the recesses a little bit more, but it's not like, it's not as much as a wash. Then if it gets too dark, right, after you do that, you go, okay, cool, maybe once it's dry, you can come back and pop some couple final highlights. Selectively. And there's my fur masterclass. That will be 10 gifted subs, please. Crap, was I supposed to charge you all earlier? Before you saw it? Dang it. Dang it. Cardinist, thanks for the follow. And Churn. Hold on. Churnsbog. What do you guys think? It's not that hard. Most of it comes down, well, there is some practice involved with the actual technique, and then knowing where to place the highlights is also a thing that takes some getting used to. But the overall, like painting it big, focusing on big to small, ignoring the lines of the sculpt, placing the highlights, like placing the textured lines in the recesses and stuff. That's all pretty easy to follow. And you will end up with a very soft fur. The little section right there was bothering me. Yeah. And yeah, painting it with the PVA glue definitely helped to like knock back some of the texture of the sculpt. It was very, very sharp. Like, okay, take another quick break. We will keep working on this guy. Yeah. He's zooming. He's so fast. But yeah, you can see how we went from there to there. Big difference, huh? Ah! Is he making goat screams? Ah! Prepotente, I dub him. What was the name of people who've read Dungeon Crawl Carl? What's the name of... So there's Prepotente, but then he has the like hell goat, the like giant hell goat that's his sister or whatever. Prepotente is a Caprid, but not all of... Is his name... Is it Bianca? The name of the other goat? Dude, I'm up to like 150 decor. I'm waiting. All right, so this is going to make sense to absolutely no one unless you play Pikmin Bloom, but I play it just to have something to do on my walks. It's basically Pokemon Go, but with Pikmin. I'm waiting to get a purple restaurant chef hat Pikmin so that I can start getting rare Pikmin, but it won't give me one. I did get a yellow or a winged taco Pikmin today, though. I got 4 different Mexican restaurant Pikmin. Story today. So I normally go to this one Mexican restaurant. And then we went to a different one today. And the same waitress from the one we normally work or go to was working at the other one also. And we're like, oh no, now they're going to know that we were cheating on them at this other restaurant. They're gonna know. Nah, it's different owners. Which waitress? The one who sometimes has her kid with her, I think. Not the big girl. Not the lady that normally works at the counter, who I think's one of the owners. Dude, she was way friendlier at the other restaurant for some reason. She like came up to us and laughed, and I've never seen her even smile when going to the other one. Maybe she's just happy that Mexico is crushing it in the World Cup right now. So is USA, by the way. Woo! USA. USA. What do you think about that, Aussies? Huh? It's our 5th favorite sport. Did you know that Qatar has the most non-nationals playing for it? That's crazy. Hey, I'm rooting for Mexico right up until they have to play the US. Speaking of, oh, how'd the Scotland game go? Didn't they play today? Did they play Brazil today? Oh, yeah. I mean, that's not good. Between Spain and Mexico, who would I root for? Probably Spain. I have more connection to Spanish people than I do to Mexicans, so. I am considered an honorary Spaniard, so I feel like if I did it, like, they might take that away from me. No one's told me I'm an honorary Mexican yet. Yeah, I saw. I like the memes of like I saw a thing earlier. It's like, would you? There's asking Scottish people, would you uh be or would you want Scotland to win the World Cup if it meant England won the next 3 World Cups? And most of them were like, no. I love that they dislike England more than winning themselves. Morocco is doing pretty well. I think Morocco is. Yeah, Morocco's making it out of groups. It should be Brazil and Morocco. Or they made it out of groups already. I watched the Scotland versus Haiti game. The Haitians were just happy to be there, dude. We're just happy to be included. I also have quite a lot of French friends, so I guess I have to root for France a little bit also. Until they come up. Until we have to play them. USA versus. I'm rooting for USA. I'm American. That's a better question to ask Dave. Let's see where his loyalties lie. Or could you? Get him out of here. We've never won a men's World Cup before. I don't think. I think we stand a legitimate chance this year. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it. We did pretty well against Mexico in the American Cup, and Mexico is like one of the top teams. So people forget that most of our, well, it's like half. But like half our squad is like Premier League or I don't remember the name of the Italian league. Like they play for like AC Milan and some pretty top teams, so clubs, sorry. Let's say we're making it to semifinals. Oh yeah, we're getting there. Going all the way, baby. Ooh. We could take him. Just saying, if there was more money in soccer in the US, we'd be the best. Actually, I don't even know if we're the best in, like, Japan, the best at baseball. Oh, you'll just have to watch Miniature Masters on Squidmore. All that big money prizes. When I come in as a secret contestant and hit them all with steel chairs. You guys didn't know I secretly went to Sweden and did a last minute run in. Yeah, don't let that distract you from back in. What was that guy's name on Reddit? Always cracks me up. Don't let that distract you from the fact that back in 1998, Undertaker threw Mankind 20 feet off Hell in a Cell. Dude always cracked me up. In case you don't know what I'm talking about, there was this guy on Reddit that used to just leave comments on threads where he would like start it off by being like a serious answer, and then suddenly he would just switch to that. Got me every time. I think it might legitimately be interesting. I hope it does well and that they do another. Would I do it? Like, as a competitor? No. Spoilers, I don't show up. I was speaking to some of the contestants at Contrast, and they were like, we kept expecting you to just show up as like a random guest star. Looking pretty soft. If they asked me to be one of the judges, I would probably do it. I heard it was very long hours speaking to them about filming it. It was like super long days and stuff. Quite stressful, apparently. Oh, they had like a full production crew and everything. Like, it wasn't like a, oh, let's film a YouTube video. It was like, let's film a TV show. But yeah. Winnie Pooh-esque. Hello. Hi, Ghoul. How are you? I'm good. Just painting a big old antelope. A big old furry antelope. Trying to work my way through some of this guy. It is a KDM model. It is the Screaming God. Winnie Pooh Esquire. Winnie Pooh Esquire. Thanks for the prime. Appreciate you. Having fun painting fur. I'm in my happy place doing this. Just painting little lines. If furries were weird nightmare beasts, I might be more into it. And not creepy anthropomorphic blue foxes. Oh, dude, I can't stand VTubers that creep me out. Especially the furry ones. I will say, though, I'll admit, I've spoken to some lady streamers. I would not blame them for being a VTuber. It's a really loud owl outside. He's hooting out there. All right. Well, it's been about 3 hours. I've showed long hair. I've showed short hair. I think that'll about cover it. If you guys have any questions about fur, now's the time to ask. But basically, yeah, we want to focus to recap, focus on the big shape, work your way to the tufts, and work your way to individual hairs. I think that's pretty much kind of it, right? Make it soft. Make it fluffy looking. It should be nice and fluffy. Can't wait to play this boss. I'm very interested. so that you can build this armor. Look at this cool ass armor. The male one is very cool. The Screaming God armor. With another extremely fun cape to paint. This actually isn't that bad. Nope, no questions about, huh? Oh, for like head hair versus fur, do you just paint the texture smoother, but with roughly the same process? It's basically the same process, but head hair, depending on the sculpt, tends to be a bit longer. So you have some more clearly defined shapes, like it's often more combed, right? So you don't have as many like little tufty bits in hair typically, but you can basically think of the process the same way. Hair's hair. And then horses, I've never painted a horse on stream, but like horses are very smooth and quite shiny. So a lot of it's almost like painting non-metallic with the way you would render the hair. But like with little lines. How would you paint a fur that has multiple fur colors in it? Like a wolf, for example? There is 2 videos you can go watch. Like wolf, like where there's actually a transition. So what I would do is I would sketch the different patches of color at the beginning. So here I base coated it all one thing. I actually base coat the different sections of the hair where you have like the transitioning elements of the hair. Same if I was doing like a tiger, I would draw the stripes, right? So I would draw the stripes of the tiger, or if I was painting a zebra or a zebra for my English viewers, I would draw the stripes as part of the base coat, and then I would render the lines on top of that, switching between the different tones in order to build the texture on top of the underlying pattern. Does that make sense? So he's all very simple and sort of one fur color. I might do some variation in this longer section, but I haven't decided. I might add some color to the legs or whatever, but I don't think he's really going to need it. I think overall there will be enough going on the model. Same with like once I start doing the OSL, these hairs will be more saturated in orange near the lanterns. So instead of using this more desaturated pale sort of sand color, I'll switch to a more orange tone to give that sense that the like light is glowing around the lantern. So I've painted it quite dark near these, and then I can build up to a more orange tone to give that sense of like, and the hairs, because hair is not solid, you will actually see I'll show you, right? Like the light will sort of pass through the hair in a way. Let me switch cameras, right? When you get the light really close to the hair, it like will start to glow through the hair somewhat, right? So I can do some effects like that. Again, making it feel softer and that it has body to it. It's not just like a hard plastic solid object. Great. Makes sense. Hope so. Let's raid into Bones. She was in here earlier. We raided Walter last week. She's playing... What the heck is she playing? Final Sentence? I don't know, some type of typing game or something. I don't know. Say hello. Have fun. I'll see you all on Friday for Feedback Friday.